Hello again, everybody. So we are now moving forward. We played with 1 and 2 point perspective last week. Now we're doing some more with 2 point perspective and then jumping into 3 point as well today first. But first, we want to get back on our 2 point, make sure we really understand it, do something slightly more complicated today. So if you recall last time, we did make your name in this grid. We will be using this again today because last time we did take our name, put it into 1 point perspective. So basically this side was straight on towards us and everything else was receding backwards. But we want to now do our name in 2 point perspective. So that means one of the sides is going to be receding backwards. So we're getting more complicated here. And I'm going to show you some techniques on how to do this. So the first thing you do need to understand is since we're going to be doing our name in perspective, in 2 point perspective, what's going to happen is we're going to have our horizon line, right? And we're going to have our 2 points. Now, what this is going to look like is you start with your front corner, if you remember that. This is the front side when we're dealing with 2 point perspective. And then the top and bottom will go back to this vanishing point. And the top and bottom on the other side will go back to the other vanishing point. And the name is going to be like this. So the name is actually going to be going backwards into perspective. And it's going to have a little bit of depth here, and we'll see the tops of all these and everything. So the tricky part is figuring out how to divide up this space to make it look like the name is going backwards in space. Because, you know, it's easy to think that, well, if we have, you know, our grid here, we can just evenly divide this up. So, you know, each space is a ½ inch wide as we're going across. But that's not how it works. When we're dealing with perspective, when we have these lines here, the closer it gets to the vanishing point, the closer together these lines are going to get. So we need to figure out how to evenly divide up this space to make it look like your name is receding backwards towards the vanishing point. Now we have our method of, you know, subdivision. Let's move this up a little bit. You know, we could do the subdivision, you know, we create a box and we divide it in half and that finds our halfway mark. And then you could divide this in half and you could keep doing this. The problem is this gets very complicated, especially when we're dealing with longer objects that are more complicated and have more boxes and ones that don't divide evenly into halves or quarters or everything. So I'm going to show you another method for that, and it's going to be using measuring points. So for my example here, I have this cube. Basically a Rubiks Cube is what I've drawn here. Oops. So basically, what I have for you here is a cube. It's a Rubiks Cube divided into 3 halves. Or sorry, 3 halves, divided into thirds. So each side looks like this. Each side is a ½ inch wide, or each cube within it is a ½ inch wide, each third. So the entire thing is 1½ inches across and 1½ inches down. And then when we get into perspective, you know, this is what it's going to kind of look like. But when we get this in perspective, how do we deal with dividing up this space? Because we can't just use the subdivision method because it's in thirds. And thirds are much more difficult than dividing it into quarters or halves or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is start with my horizon line. I'll put it a little bit higher here. And it's 2 point perspective, so I'm starting with my 2 vanishing points. Vanishing point 1, vanishing point 2. Okay, and I'm going to draw my cube somewhere in this space below my horizon line. Now, I'm going to start with one side. We'll start with the one side, which is essentially going to be this side here, and then we'll work our way to the rest. So if you remember, when we're doing 2 point perspective, you always start with the side that is closest to you, which is this one. And this is this side, because it is closest to you, is going to be the true height of the object. So I'm going to put it down here. And the true height, which I've already told you, is 1.5 inches. I'm going to do 1.5 inch line, and I'm going to divide it up into my grid. So 3 1/2-inch little boxes here. So 3 1/2-inch lines, and I got my little tick marks to help me know, because that's going to help me figure out where these lines will meet up. Okay, so I'm going to do this side. That means I'll get my lighter pencil out for a bit here. I'm going to go back to my vanishing point to figure out this side of the box. Oops. And another line back to my vanishing point. I want to make sure these are dark enough that you guys can see it. Okay, so the question is going to be, where are these vertical lines? These lines here and this one, how do I figure out where they are? And first we are going to want to figure out our backside, so I'm going to just kind of lightly put that in here because this is what I'm figuring this is going to look like. But to figure out where these points are, dividing up the rest of it, to do that, I'm going to create what I'm calling a measuring line. So I have my vertical line here. I'm going to make a second line that's perpendicular to it. So at a right angle to this line here, just beneath it, that's going to be the same exact size. So 1.5 inches, I've got three tick marks, each at the 1/2 inch line. And so this is my measuring line. Measuring line. And this is what's going to help us figure out where these other lines are going to be. To do that, now I've already decided I want this to be where my back of my cube is. If I was to put a point right here as the very back side of the box, and since this is my measuring line, that kind of mimics, it mimics what this looks like too, I'm going to connect this dot to this dot, but follow it all the way back to my horizon line. So by connecting them and following back here, I've created another point that's called a measuring point. It's not a vanishing point. This is still 2-point perspective. This is just going to help us measure. And what it's going to do is help us evenly divide up this space. So if I was to then follow this measuring point to each of these dots that I've created, each of the little ticks, I'm going to connect this here. And then connect this one here. Where this touches the bottom of our box is going to be where these sides or these divisions will be. Here and here. And I'm just drawing a vertical line essentially straight up from this. And so now I've divided this into thirds. And it's so easy. All it is a matter of, making this measuring line and then having it go back to a measuring point back here, and then this helps you determine where all those are. Now to figure out the horizontal lines, that's easy, or our diagonal lines going the other way essentially. That goes back to our vanishing point. So I can go like this. I don't have to go all the way back. We know that it's going there. And then this one goes here. And now I have this side of my cube. I'm just going to darken this, and I can shade it in to help us see. So I've now made a checkerboard pattern that is divided into thirds. And hopefully you can see where this is going when we're doing our name and perspective, because it's going to be similar to this, except the name's going to be longer going back here. But I want to keep drawing this out so we get this. So I want to do the other side of my cube here. So I'm going to go back to my vanishing point for the top and bottom. And I'm looking for this to be a cube, so I'm going to kind of guess where my back side will be. Probably about here. And then we're going to make our measuring line. So that is 1.5 inches long, perpendicular going the other way here. So this line that we're making is going to be the same side as this side that we're working on. So you can't use this one over here because it's on the, you know, the other side of the object. We need this to be directly beneath the side that we're drawing. So, oops. And I got 1, 2, 3, each divided at 1/2 inch. Okay. So now I know I have a dot here on the bottom, and I can connect these two lines, and I'll bring you to our next measuring point. And if you're confused about where these measuring points will go, it does help to know that it's going to be somewhere in between this side, essentially, this side that you're working on, and your vanishing point. It's not going to be farther out than the vanishing point. That's not going to happen. It's going to be somewhere kind of like in the middle between these spaces. So, and it has to do with where you decide the back of your box is going to be. So if the back of the box was back here, then this vanishing point would be, this back would be here, and then this would go back to somewhere around here. But that's not where we decided that we wanted the back of our cube be, because we're trying to make this look like a perfect cube. So I'm going to do that. Now to find out, you know, how to divide this one evenly, we have this is the right measuring point. We're not using this one, we're using the new one we just made. And then we're going to go from here to this line, this dot, and to this dot. And where it intersects with this line, that's where our lines are going to be. And remember, they're going to be perfectly vertical, going straight up and down from these points. And hopefully you guys are following along with this in your sketchbook. Doing this is not going to be the homework, but you know, it always helps if you practice these things. So if you're following along, it might make it a little bit easier for you when we get to the name. So now we just need to divide up the lines going the other way. So we can just connect it. Since we already figured out where this one is here, we're just connecting that. And then connecting that. And we have now figured out this side. And the top's going to be easy because we already have most of our points kind of figured out here. So it's really just a matter of connecting the dots. So I'm just going to do that quickly here. So I'm going to find the top of the box. And I don't necessarily have to draw the line all the way back as long as I know that's where it's going. This one. And this one. I mean, essentially what we're making is another wire form on this, but it's divided into thirds instead of divided into halves. So, you know, that just makes it slightly more complicated. So you can pretend that you're working on a wireframe. There we go. I can shade this in so you can see how I've now figured this out. In 2-point perspective. Okay, so recap. It's all about these measuring line and measuring points. By figuring out our front side, and to do this we need to know how big this side is and how big this side is. So since we have a cube here, we know it's 3 blocks high and 3 across, so I had the 3 blocks high, and then I would do 3 across here. If this was a longer form, let's say this was 6 blocks across, I would do my 3 blocks high, because that's still going to stay the same height, but I would do 6 across going this way. So the longer the object is, the longer your measuring line is, because it's going to be in relation to the size of this side. And then it's a matter of figuring out where you want your back side to be, and then connecting the end of your measuring line to the horizon, which will give you your measuring point. Okay?